Sometimes, a single sound can change everything. It's not just noise. It's a signal. A release. It's the sound of 20,000 people finding a belief they thought they had lost. This was one of those times. The air itself was vibrating. A low, electric hum of anticipation that you can't fake, that you can't produce with pyrotechnics. It's the sound of 20,000 people holding their collective breath, waiting for a single moment. 4 months, the division had felt hollow. A championship held by a stand-in, a throne sitting empty. They had watched the grainy phone videos of her rehab, the painful-looking physical therapy, the whispered rumors of her return. They felt her absence like a missing piece of the story. And then the lights went out. A single, familiar guitar riff sliced through the darkness. The screen lit up. This is my brutality. The arena didn't just cheer. It detonated. A wall of sound so loud it shook the cameras, turning the broadcast feed into a vibrating mess of light and noise. People were on their feet, tears in their eyes, arms outstretched. She appeared at the top of the ramp, silhouetted against the bright lights, a warrior returning home. She hadn't even taken a step, and they were already chanting her name. This wasn't just a comeback. It was a resurrection. She walked slowly, letting every second soak in, the adoration washing over her. The pain, the isolation, the grueling months of recovery, it all melted away, replaced by this deafening wave of love. She climbed the ropes, raised her fist, and the entire building screamed with her. She was back. Rhea Ripley was home, and everything was finally right with the world. The celebration was pure. It was real. Rhea stood in the center of the ring, a microphone in her hand. The cheers still raining down so heavily, she couldn't even speak. She just laughed, a laugh of pure relief. And as the noise finally began to quiet, a different theme song hit. A frantic, almost chaotic beat. The crowd's cheers turned to murmurs of confusion. Out walked Liv Morgan. She wasn't dressed to compete. She was in street clothes, a hoodie pulled up, but she had a wide, almost manic smile on her face. The commentators were confused. Was she here to congratulate her? To challenge her? Rhea looked puzzled, but she smiled, opening her arms as Liv slid into the ring. This was her friend. This was someone who had been there. Liv walked right up to her, and they embraced, a long, tight hug in the center of the ring. The crowd awed, a moment of sportsmanship, of solidarity. And then, it happened. Liv didn't let go. She pulled Rhea in closer, whispered something in her ear, and then, with a horrifying suddenness, drove her knee into Rhea's recently injured shoulder. A guttural scream cut through the microphone. Rhea collapsed. Liv didn't stop. She began a brutal, systematic attack, targeting the injury, tearing at the rehabbed joint. The arena went silent. The hug was a lie. The smile was a mask. Liv mounted the ropes, looking down at the broken champion, her face not angry, but satisfied. This wasn't just revenge. This was a message. There is no sound in professional wrestling quite like 20,000 people falling silent at the exact same time. It's not just quiet. It's a vacuum. The boos that followed were weak, hesitant, because the audience hadn't processed the anger yet. They were still stuck on the confusion. The cameras panned across the front rows, capturing faces frozen in disbelief. A young fan, her Rhea Ripley foam title drooping in her hand, had tears welling in her eyes. A man who had been screaming moments before now just stared, his mouth on commentary. The professional voices cracked. They had no script for this. This wasn't the story they were told to sell. This felt different. It felt cold. Liv Morgan simply walked away, backing up the ramp, that same serene, unsettling smile on her face. She didn't taunt. She didn't raise her arms in victory. She just laughed. As if she had just finished a mundane task, like taking out the trash. Medical staff rushed the ring, their movements frantic, a stark contrast to the perpetrator's calm. They carefully tended to Rhea, shielding her injured shoulder, her face a mask of agony and pure, unadulterated betrayal. The hero's return had lasted 4 minutes. The nightmare that replaced it felt like it would last forever. The show abruptly cut to a commercial, leaving everyone in that arena and watching at home in a state of suspended shock. The why was a physical, pulsing question that hung in the air. Backstage, the area just behind the curtain, known as the gorilla position, was chaos. But it was a controlled, terrified chaos. Usually, when a segment ends, the producers and the executives are giving high fives, celebrating the reaction. Tonight, they were silent, staring at the monitors. The head of talent, a man who had seen everything, simply took off his headset and placed it on the desk. He didn't say a word. He just rubbed his temples. Other wrestlers, waiting for their own matches, were glued to the screens. Their faces weren't like the fans. They weren't just shocked. They were calculating. They were professionals who understood the business, and what they had just seen didn't make business sense? Or, perhaps, it made a terrifying new kind of sense? Liv Morgan, when she walked through that curtain, wasn't met with anger or questions. She was met by 2 men in dark suits, security guards who had never been seen backstage before. They didn't speak to her. They simply nodded and escorted her past the bewildered wrestlers, past the silent executives, and directly to a private office. The locker room began to whisper. This wasn't an impulse. This wasn't a creative decision made by a writer. This was a plan. This was organized. And it was sanctioned from the very, very top. The message Liv delivered wasn't for Rhea. It was for everyone else. The next day, the internet was unusable. The wrestling world wasn't just discussing the attack, they were dissecting it, frame by frame. Podcasters recorded emergency episodes. It doesn't make sense, one host said, his voice heavy with frustration. Liv and Rhea were legitimate friends. You don't do that. You don't target an injury like that unless it's real. The line between the story and the reality had been completely erased. Fans who prided themselves on knowing the business were lost. There was no precedent. Was this an elaborate, masterful piece of storytelling? Or had something gone terribly wrong? Theories ranged from the plausible to the absurd. Some said Liv had gone into business for herself, a rogue act of professional suicide. Whispered that Rhea's injury was worse than they thought, and this was a way to write her off television again. But it felt too cruel. The company's official social media was silent. They didn't post a clip. They didn't tweet, oh my god! They posted nothing, as if it hadn't happened. This silence was, in itself, the loudest clue. It confirmed this wasn't part of the regular show. This was something else. This was a move being made on a chessboard none of them had ever been allowed to see. And the mystery only deepened as the hours ticked by. The why grew from a question into a conspiracy. The answer, or the first piece of it, didn't come from a press release. It came from a blurry photograph taken by an airport employee, posted on a minor celebrity gossip site. It went unnoticed for hours until a wrestling blogger recognized the face. The picture was timestamped from 3 days before the attack. It showed Liv Morgan, not in her punk rock wrestling gear, but in an immaculate, expensive black pantsuit, sunglasses on, stepping off a private Gulfstream jet. Behind her, helping her with her bag, were not other wrestlers, but 2 of the most powerful executives from the company's parent corporation. These weren't the wrestling people. These were the media titans. The shareholders. The ones who saw wrestlers not as people, but as assets on a balance sheet. Suddenly, the attack wasn't a heel turn. It was a transaction. The image spread like fire. This was premeditated. This was corporate. The whispers in the locker room turned into terrified confirmation. Liv hadn't just attacked Rhea. She had made a deal. She had bypassed the entire creative structure, bypassed her peers, and gone straight to the top. The question was no longer, why did she do it? The new, terrifying question was, what did they promise her? What was the mystery payoff that was worth betraying your closest friend on a live broadcast? The following Monday, the flagship show opened with no music. No pyrotechnics. Just Liv Morgan, standing in the ring, bathed in a single, cold blue spotlight. She was wearing the suit from the photograph. The championship title, which had been vacated by Rhea's injury and was set to be decided in a tournament, was on a pedestal next to her. The crowd booed. A deep, unified, hateful sound. But Liv just smiled, that same empty smile from the pay-per-view. She held up a microphone. "You're all chanting, 'Why? Liv? Why?'" she said, her voice dripping with condescending calm. "You're asking the wrong question. You should be asking, how? How did I do what no one else had the guts to do?" She walked over to the championship. "You all believe this is about earning it. About paying your dues. You think it's about friendship? About moments?" She laughed. A short, sharp, ugly sound. "It's not. This is a billion-dollar industry. And the millions you all talk about don't go to the person who has the best match. They go to the person who is willing to be the face of the company." She picked up the title. "I was promised this. I was promised the main event. I was promised the talk shows, the movie roles, the millions in endorsements. All I had to do, was remove the obstacle. Rhea was never a friend. She was just bad for business." The mystery payoff was exposed. It wasn't a bag of cash. It was the entire machine. Liv Morgan was handed the championship. There was no tournament. She was declared the new face of the division. The locker room was fractured. Half of the roster was disgusted, seeing it as the ultimate betrayal of their craft. The other half, was quiet. They were envious. They saw the game had just been changed. Hard work no longer mattered. Fan support was irrelevant. The only thing that mattered was your willingness to be a tool for the corporation. Liv was now the ultimate company woman, and she was untouchable. Her matches were short. She was protected by authority figures. She was flanked by the same security that had escorted her from Gorilla. She had become the physical manifestation of ambition, detached from all emotion. But the company had miscalculated. They believed the audience would accept her. They thought the move was so shocking, so bold, that the fans would have to respect it. They were wrong. The fans didn't just dislike her, they hated her. Not with the fun boo, the villain hate. It was a deep, systemic rejection. They hated what she represented. They saw the millions being poured into her, and they resented every single dollar. They had been told their voices mattered. Liv's ascension proved that they didn't. Months passed. Liv Morgan was, by every metric, a success. She was on billboards. She did the late-night talk show circuit. Her merchandise, though not bought by many, was front and center in every arena. She was the champion. She had everything she had been promised. But the sound in the arenas had changed again. The passionate hatred had faded, replaced by something far worse, apathy. When her music hit, the reaction was polite, scattered. People didn't boo. They just sat on their hands. They used her segments as a bathroom break. She was the champion of an empty kingdom. She had the title, but she had lost the one thing a wrestler cannot survive without a connection. She was isolated. Backstage, no one spoke to her except for business. In the ring, her opponents wrestled her with a cold, detached professionalism. There was no fire, no story, because everyone knew the ending was already written. She was the chosen one, and it had cost her everything. The payoff had been delivered, but the corporation had forgotten to factor in the human cost. They had created a star with no light, a champion with no subjects. She was, for the first time in her life, completely and utterly alone. And she was beginning to realize that the millions didn't keep you warm at night. It happened on the one-year anniversary of the betrayal. Liv was in the ring, cutting another one of her sterile, corpo-approved promos about leadership. The crowd was barely listening. Then, the lights went out. A single guitar riff. The arena didn't just cheer, it wept. The sound was biblical. A year of pent-up frustration, a feeling ignored, of missing their hero, all came pouring out. When the lights came up, Rhea Ripley was standing on the ramp. She looked different. The playful energy was gone. She was colder, harder, and in the best shape of her life. She didn't walk to the ring. She stalked. Live's corporate security guards rushed to the ring, but Rhea dismantled them. Not with wrestling moves, but with brutal, efficient, targeted strikes. She tore them apart. She climbed into the ring, and Liv, the untouchable champion, scrambled backwards. Her face, for the first time, showing genuine, primal fear. Rhea didn't say a word. She just pointed. First, at Live. Then, at the championship. And finally, she pointed at the crowd. The millions. Not the dollars. The people. The fans Liv had sold out. The mystery was never about the money Liv was paid. It was about the debt she had just been handed. The payoff was over. The collection was about to begin.